Fanfic Corner, presented by Jennifer. Kabili and Beno, Part 2. Kabili felt his pillow shift, then move, then groan. Kabili opened his pale periwinkle eyes and lifted his head to see the strange lion cub had awoken. Queen Nala was fast asleep, right where she was before. But the foreign cub was watching Rafiki, Simba, and Vitani converse quietly in the corner. "Is he safe to be around?" Vitani asked. "Yes, Kabili will be fine," Rafiki responded. "The older cub will just suffered a head injury, but he will be okay with some rest. His sister, however, seems to have been attacked. She also has a cold, so keep her warm, fed, and dry. Make sure she gets plenty of rest and stays safe." "Of course, Rafiki. Thanks for stopping by," Simba said. "Hakuna Shashai," Rafiki replied. "No problem." With that, Rafiki headed back out into the rain, which had all but ceased for the moment. Vitani and Simba continued to converse. "What's your name?" Kabili asked the cub quietly. The cub jumped from fear, as he was not aware that anyone else had awoken. He turned his head around to looked Kabili in the eyes with his dark red ones. "Beno," the cub sputtered. Kabili looked into the cub's frightened red eyes and saw the quivering soul inside. The two cubs watched as Kovu joined Vitani and Simba to discuss the cubs. "Is that your sister?" Kabili asked, Beno motioning to the resting cub in his aunt's arms. "Yes," Beno replied, and as he strained to look over his shoulder at Kabili. "Is she gonna be all right?" Kabili moved his innocently large eyes over to gaze at the infant as he thought about what had happened before he fell asleep. "I don't know," he answered honestly, as he tilted his head in thought. "I can go ask my mom." "Okay," Beno replied. "Could you do that for me?" Kabili nodded and slowly stood up. He stretched his arms out in front of him and yawned blissfully as he prepared to leave Nala's warm side. He trotted over to his mother, who was still talking, and he rubbed against her legs. "Hello, son," Vitani whispered gently, leaning down to lick her son's tuft of fur on his head. Her pink tongue roughed his thin fur and made him smile. "Did you sleep well?" "Yes, Mother," Kabili replied. "Is Beno's sister going to be okay?" "So the cub's name is Beno." "So the cub's name is Beno, huh?" Simba asked Kabili, leaning down to get on his level. "Could you go ask Beno if he wants to join us? We want to talk to him." "Okay," Kabili said, quickly scurrying back over to his new friend. "Your son is nothing like you, sis," Kovu pointed out as the three adults watched Kabili. "I know," Vitani replied, "but he will fit in better here in the Pridelands with his trusting and caring traits." They watched Kabili whisper something in Beno's ear. Beno slowly stood up and wearily glanced their way. With precise steps, he made his way over to them in a much more balanced way than Kabali's scattered steps behind him. As the two cubs approached them, they all took a seat on the cool stone floor. "Hello there, Beno," Simba told the young cub. The adults noticed how cautious the cub was and how afraid he seemed of his environment. "You don't need to be afraid. We won't hurt you," Simba said. Beno looked into Simba's eyes. The two shared a moment of silence as Simba stared back with a kind of glint in his eyes, attempting to gain Beno's trust. But what was meant to be a simple, kind glance became a revealing moment. Simba's red eyes widened as he looked the cub over carefully. Kovu and Vitani watched curiously as Simba examined the cub thoroughly, and the cub sat innocently staring back. "Are you King Simba?" Beno asked quietly. "Yes, that's me," he replied, without asking with a slight nod. A slight nod. "Beno, who are your parents?" "Daddy said to come to you for help, King Simba," Beno told him, bowing down as he realized this was the king. "Sire, who's your father, Beno?" Kovu asked, more firmly than Simba had. "My dad's name is Mato," Beno replied. Simba exhaled lightly with a huge smile on his face. "Who's Mato?" Kovu inquired, looking Simba in the eyes. Simba smiled widely at the cub and responded, "Mato is my cousin." Beno gave Simba a tiny, almost invisible smile. Simba stepped over to Beno, and they rubbed heads affectionately. "I don't believe I've ever met Mato," Kovu said, looking from the cub to Simba. Simba shook his head. "Mato left the land before you were born, Kovu. He took his new mate and went off to find a better home with more food and freedom for his future family," Simba replied, looking down at Beno. "That would be you, lad." "Who was his mate?" Vitani asked. "His mate was a good friend of Nala's. Her name was, or is, Kalua," the king explained. "Where are your parents, Beno?" "We came down from the mountains. They told me to flee to Pride Rock with my sister." "Flee from what?" Vitani asked, her ears erect at the possibility of danger. "From the hyenas," Beno whispered with a shudder. "Where were your parents when you left them?" Simba asked. "We were in the desert, and we saw a whole pack of hyenas resting at an oasis. My mom said they were probably hunting us because they smelled my dad's blood from his injured leg. So Dad told us to run for Pride Rock and not stop for anything but rest, food, or water." The cub spilled out. "What's all this about?" Nala asked with a yawn as she stepped up to the group. "Nala, this is Beno," Simba introduced her. "Hello there, Beno," Nala said, leaning down to greet him with a head rub. "He just happens to be Mato and Kalua's son," Simba told her. "The last time he saw his parents, they were surrounded by hyenas. I'm going to send a team out to see if they can find them." "But Simba, it's pouring out there," Nala said, taking in all the things her husband just told her. It was a lot for her to think about. "But they could be in danger," Simba insisted. "She's right, sire," Vitani interjected. "You'd be putting your Pride members in danger if you sent them out in this weather." Simba lowered his ears and looked at the rain. He knew they were right. "I'll assemble them now and send them later, I guess," he said. Nala lovingly nuzzled into his mane, giving him comfort. "I know you're worried about our friends, but there's nothing you can do right now," Nala told him gently. "Is my sister going to be okay?" Beno asked suddenly. The adults looked down at Kaba and Beno, sitting side by side and staring up at them in wonder. "I'm not sure," Simba said, "but we think your sister will be okay." "What's her name?" Nala asked, lying beside him so she could be on his level. "Tallulah," Beno said, very quietly as he watched his sister carefully. "Her name is Tallulah." The adults watched as Beno slowly walked over to Kiara's paws, where his sister was sleeping peacefully. He gave Tallulah a soft kiss on her forehead and laid down, resting his paws and head on Kiara's forepaws. Kiara smiled gently as the at the cub as she watched them lay cradled in her arms. She longed for the day she would hold her unborn cub like she was holding these two, affectionately embracing and snuggling into her cozy fur. I think we know who will care for the cubs while if their parents don't turn up, Simba said with a smile as the four of them watched Kiara lay her head carefully in her paws, gently covering the younger cub's body with her neck. Almost like a blanket. Go ahead and rest, everyone. We'll send a search party out for my cousin and his mate when the rain lets up. With that, Vitani took Heba in her mouth by his scruff, and she went to lie down in the corner of the cave, next to a few other resting lionesses. Nala and Simba sat down and watched Kovu lay next to their daughter, and the couple and the two cubs slept quietly in peace. And all was well and comfy in the den, except for the horrifying thoughts that enveloped and entangled Nala and Simba's minds as they wondered what could be happening to their long-lost friends in this horrible weather.